Hi friends, it's Lacey from Pandemonium Publishing House. I hope everyone is doing well and that you had a really productive week. Happy Friday. I just wanted to answer some of your questions today with Live with Lacey, and I get these sent into our email, pandapublishing8@gmail.com. Sometimes we get them in the comments, so if you want to know about publishing, make sure that you put your questions in the comments. I'm going to try to get to as many as I can. And today one of the questions was traditional versus self-publishing. What's the difference in a nutshell? Okay, so we're going to kind of give you like an overview of what the main differences are. There are a lot of differences, but if I were to start out, I would say that traditional publishing is when the publisher buys your story. So basically what they do is they give you a royalty. Some places give you an advance. Some places say, you know what, we're going to give you a higher royalty instead of an advance, especially for new authors. That's pretty common. So that being said, I think the main difference between traditional and self-publishing is that when the publisher buys your book or your story, they are making the investment and they are saying, you know what, we now own this story. We own everything about this book, and we can change what we want. We can make additions, subtractions. We can do what we want with this work and change it into exactly what we think the market wants, okay? So whether that's changing your voice, whether it's changing the narration, maybe it's completely, rewriting a character, that kind of stuff. So basically the publisher in a traditional publishing contract has all the power, okay? For children's books, for example, we choose the illustrator. You do not get a say usually on the illustrator that you're working with. Sometimes publishers will ask you not even for inspiration in terms of what styles and things that you like. But most of the time, they're the ones putting up the investment, so they get to say, you know what, this is how this book is going to look. You sold your rights to the story. We can do what we want with it, and you do not get a chance to have any input whatsoever. So traditional publishing basically is trading your story away for a royalty or an advance, okay? So that's what the big difference is. With self-publishing, a lot of the time you get to obviously choose your illustrator. You get to pick what you want your story to sound like in your voice, and it can be anything that you want. Now, I would caution you, if you are self-publishing, to work with a publisher that works with published authors, because we know the ins and outs of things. We know that your story should be edited. We know that your story should follow the submission guideline, the industry standards, and it should look a certain way. It should perform a certain way in order to be competitive in the marketplace. So if you're a self-published author, you want to make sure that you work with a publisher or you really do your homework, because there are a lot of things that can go wrong, that can make your book not as good as it needs to be in order to be competitive in the marketplace, okay? So the difference between traditional versus self-publishing, you have all the control, okay? You decide what illustrator you work with, you decide what those look like, you decide the exact story in your words. You don't have to change a thing, okay? Traditional publishing, publishers putting up the money, they're the person who's saying, you know what, I'm investing in this book and this story and this author, and I want to see a return on my investment, so this needs to change, that needs to change, and we own the rights to the story. Obviously the copyright is still registered in your name, but you give us the power to change whatever we want to see and whatever we see fit. So in a nutshell, that's the difference. I usually like to ask my authors for input in terms of what kind of styles they like illustratively. I will say to them, what do you think should definitely be in the story that you don't want to get rid of? If an edit, if our editor says this is something that I think should be taken out, how do you feel about that? Are you willing to compromise? So we work a lot closer with our authors at Pandemonium Publishing House than most traditional publishers do, because of the fact that I want to see you on the page. I want your style. I want your voice. If everything looked the way that I thought it should look, or the way that I perceive style, or the way that I read or like to read books, then what's the point? There's no individuality there. Of course, we take into account that marketing matters and, what does the industry demand and what are people expecting, that kind of thing. But in terms of having everything kind of washed over in my style, that's something that I don't do. I want to see you on the page. So traditional publishers versus self-publishing, two big differences. You can find out more on our blog, pandemoniumpublishing.com. And if you go to blogs, that little tab, you'll be able to see I've written a whole bunch about the differences, and you can find those articles on our site. Okay, what makes authors easy to work with? I like this question. So working with authors, there are so many of them on this team. I think we're almost up to 50 this year. So that being said, working with authors is easy when they do the work, they put in the work in terms of showing up to events, when they put in the work of taking your feedback and constructively putting that into their manuscript. They're easy to work with when they are receptive to what you're saying and they're willing to learn. Making it easy to work with authors is when they come to you and they say, you know what, this is what I'm struggling with. How can you help me with this? Or making your life easier as a publisher to work with authors is when they understand what the expectations are. So you have laid out those expectations very clearly. This is what you expect from them. This is the standard of work that you expect from them. That makes it easy to work with them as well. So communication is a big, big key. That's huge. What the expectations are of the publisher and what the expectations are on the author from that publisher are very important to discuss and very important to know. Another thing that makes authors really easy to work with is when they don't give up, okay? So whether it's changing a manuscript a bunch of times because it's not up to the standard, or, it's not reading the way that it should, or there are too many errors, or a character's not being developed, or all of those things. When they do the work, when they take the feedback, when they implement your suggestions and they don't give up, no matter how many times it takes, that's what makes them easy to work with too. And I mean, I'm so lucky that every author on my team I get along with so well. We have such an open communication style, and they know that they can talk to me about anything. Yeah, I've had some of them say, you know what, I don't want to do this edit again, which I can totally appreciate, okay, because editing is brutal, and revisions and rewriting and all that kind of stuff. But we have an understanding that this is a standard, this is what we need to do to make the book better, and that is the end goal. So we work really hard together to make sure that the final book is something that we're both really, really proud of and that we're ready to put out there to the world. So that's what makes authors easy to work with. And yeah, there are different personalities, different beliefs, different styles, different ways of doing things with all of the authors on my team. But I like to think that we all are rowing in the same direction. We're all making it to our destination of having this book come out and be absolutely phenomenal and having people love it and kids request it and want to read it over and over and over again. So, that makes my job easy. What are the best times to do a book launch? Okay, so that question is a little bit complicated because there are so many different genres, okay? So typically in January, we launch books that are like self-help, wellness, meditation, mindfulness, all that kind of stuff. You kind of can go by the holiday schedule of like holidays throughout the year and different themes throughout the year. So January, we know, is self-help, fitness, resolutions, all that kind of good stuff. And then February is obviously dating and love and romance. And if you're having a book launch in February and you've done this wonderful romance book, then that's something that's obviously going to be a great idea and a great time to launch that book. March is going to be like March break, so we have a lot of kids books come out in March. Sports books come out in March usually, like World Series books, baseball books, that kind of thing. I would say May is summer reads, so those beach reads. People are getting ready to go on vacation and they want to take a really great book with them, so that's when we would launch some of those really interesting books. Sometimes thrillers come out in the summer, depending on the setting. Anything that's kind of what people are going to take with them to read on vacation or at the beach is always a great idea to launch during those months. September, October are thrillers, kids books, fiction, all types of fiction. Historical fiction sometimes comes out in the spring. A lot of it comes out in the fall, obviously depending on the setting and subject matter, all that kind of stuff. You've got before Christmas, you've got before the holidays, so you want to make sure that you're launching your book when it makes sense. A lot of books launch in September and October, so keep that in mind as well, because there's a lot of noise in the marketplace during those 2 months. There's a lot of noise from Pandemonium Publishing House during those 2 months when we launch all of our books for kids and things like that. So just keep that in mind. Also, when you're doing your launches, to say, okay, when's a great time for me to launch this book, but also when am I going to get the space and the attention that I need to have this book noticed. Okay, so that's something that you really want to do too. So like I said, if you want to send in your questions, I'm happy to answer them all week. Okay, I get emails all week with questions, and then we go through and we decide which ones we're going to answer right away. Sometimes we group them together. So that's pandapublishing8@gmail.com. That's where you want to send in those questions. Send them anytime, and I will try to get to them weekly. Like I said, sometimes we group them together, so your question might not be answered till a little later until we have similar questions that come up, okay? Or you can always put in the comments the questions that you have while we're live. And I just want to thank you so much for supporting us and for supporting our authors and illustrators and artists. And, we're coming up on our 10-year anniversary in October. Can you believe it? 10 years Pandemonium Publishing House has been in business, and this would not happen without all of you. So thank you for supporting our work and for continuing to support the arts. We know how important that is. And I also want to say that we have a whole bunch of new books coming out, so please stay tuned for that. Shop on our website, pandemoniumpublishing.com/shop, and you can see all of our titles. We're coming out with new stuff all the time. This is a huge year. We have so many books coming out by new authors, but also the authors who are already in our house. So make sure you stay tuned to our website, pandemoniumpublishing.com, for all of that. Happy Friday. Have a great weekend. And I will see you next time live with Lacey, Pandemonium Publishing House.